Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, if you are self-isolating at the moment, I just wanted to say a big warm hello to you all. And if you would like to not only listen to this Daily Tech Podcast, but chat to me one-on-one, ask me a question, anything at all, I just want you to know that my door is open to each and every one of you. I don't want anybody going stir crazy out there, because behind those tales of panic buying and people going crazy, I'm convinced as a global community, we are all in this together. And you know what? We're all going to get through this together. So remember, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me, Instagram, LinkedIn, just look for me at Neil C. Hughes, or anything at all. Let me know and I'll get straight back to you. Now, today I have Brian Vernon on the podcast, and he's the CEO of a company called Wave. And for those of you that don't know, Wave powers many of the most popular brands at the intersection of sports and entertainment. And much of that takes place on the social and digital platforms that Gen Z and millennials think of today as television. And in just 2 years, Wave has become one of the largest digital publishers in the world, generating over 2.5 billion in video views, 90 million plus engagements a month. And they also have 40 million followers or subscribers, reaching over 300 million sports fans each month. So I invited him on here today to learn about the behaviour and global sports consumption changes and learn how people may be changing the way they relate to sports and ultimately what that means for media and culture. And let's face it, in a new world at the moment where sport and even the prospects of the Olympics being cancelled, I wanted to learn more about how all the global pandemic has affected their business and what they're doing differently now. So come with me all the way to Los Angeles, where Brian Vernon, CEO of Wave, is waiting to speak with us all. And rest assured, we will remain at least 2 meters apart at all times. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
I appreciate you having me. So my name is Brian Vernon. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Wave. I guess start a little bit about myself. Born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. Massive Cleveland sports fan. And, professionally speaking, I've been doing, entrepreneurial stuff for about a decade now, which is, somewhat hard to believe, but, everything has been, in and around young athletes, young sports fans, new and emerging media. And I think, certainly a lot of those experiences led to, the manifestation of, what became Wave, which was started now about 2.5 years ago. We, would think of ourselves as a modern day sports media holding company or, a modern day sports media group. When we started the business, this was about June of 2017. Really is based on a very simple premise, which was that everyone and their brother kept saying that young sports fans don't watch and talk about sports as much as maybe I did or you did growing up, or that fandom is down with this next generation. And we actually felt the exact opposite was true. Certainly, television and kind of traditional viewership and engagement was down on linear and .coms, but we think that fandom and engagement and consumption is actually at an all-time high on what we would refer to as core and emerging digital platforms. Those being the Instagrams and the Snapchats and the YouTubes and the Facebooks and the TikToks and about a dozen or so others. And so we simply spent the last couple of years building many dozens of digitally native media brands across many different sports topics, fandoms, et cetera. And I've been fortunate to build a pretty large presence across today Instagram, Snap, TikTok and Facebook, and soon to be a handful of other platforms as well. But it's a little bit of background and call it precursor or overview of where we got to today.
Fantastic. And one of the reasons I was excited to get you on here was after doing a little research, I quickly found some breathtaking stats. For example, I think in 2 years, Wave has become one of the largest digital publishers in the world, generating over 2.5 billion video views and 90 million plus engagements per month. And Wave has also got over, I think, 40 million followers/subscribers and reach over 300 million sports fans every single month. But I mean, can you set the scene and tell me exactly what Wave is and the kind of problems that it's solving for businesses out there and the value that it's delivering to sports fans?
Yeah, like I kind of said at the top, I think, if you strip everything down, our business is really, really simple. And it's in line with, consumer motivations and sensibilities. And so, if you believe in, this general premise that, fandom is still really, really high, and that this next generation still loves sports, just as much as, I did growing up, I'm in my early 30s now, then I think our business will make sense to you. And so it becomes a question of, or rather not of, are people still watching sports, but more so, where are they watching them? And then if you're going to deliver a solution, at least we believe that you should do it where those fans and where those consumers have migrated. And so let's just assume, for this case or for this conversation that folks believe what I'm saying or believe in our thesis. So, the fan has moved from traditional television and websites to core and emerging digital. Like we said, the Instagrams, the Snaps, the TikToks, the YouTubes, the Facebooks of the world, and so forth. And so our business is really quite simple in the sense that we have identified and recognized all these meaningful fandoms. And then we've just developed a digitally native media brand on the platforms where people are. So we're entertaining people in the places where they're spending their time and creating primarily short form video programming, covering a lot of the same stories and the narratives that people have cared about for many, many years, just adapting it to this new paradigm, so to speak, where fans are.
I've got to ask, I mean, what behaviour and global sports consumption changes have you seen over the years, and how people are changing the way they relate to sports? Because I would imagine that you've seen quite a few changes over the years, and ultimately, what does that mean for media and culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, not to belabor the point or beat a dead horse by any means, but just the places where consumption and engagement are happening are just very much fundamentally different, today than even 5, or 10 years ago. So being cognizant of that and adapting to the consumer behavior and the changes therein is paramount if you want to be successful. And I think secondly too, it's this idea of fandom and particularly the idea that fandom we really can't so much fit in a singular box today, so to speak. I think today more so than ever there is a really diverse and wide array of interests amongst sports fans globally. And what we've found, and this is certainly a big part of our underlying thesis, is that non-traditional sports or untold stories are just as popular as the big 5, the international footballs, the American football, basketball, baseball, hockey, etc. And so being able to deliver a diverse set of programming and experiences, I think is very much at the top of our priority list.
And I'm curious, what is the story behind Wave? Because I've got a feeling, have you always been a sports fan? Was that what put you on this journey, or was it something else?
Yeah, I've always been a sports fan. was an athlete myself. Was fortunate enough to play baseball at the collegiate level for 4 years, and then, as I mentioned, kind of jumped into the entrepreneurial world. Shortly thereafter, about a decade ago, my co-founder Sean was a collegiate tennis player, massive sports fan. Mac, who was our first hire on the content side, and with us from day one, played quarterback at Duke University. So I would say it's safe to say, many of the team members from the earliest folks to people joining. I think sports has always been a big part of all of our upbringings. And when we started, it really was based on what we were seeing happening in the world, having this really strong conviction that that fandom is still ever present, in fact at an all-time high, and that there was a lot of white space, call it a once in a generation window or opportunity to build this modern day sports media holding company.
And of course, one of the big problems with sports at the moment is there is no sport, and it's very frustrating for fans and sports teams alike. So I've got to ask, how is the coronavirus and the lockdowns throughout the world, how is that affecting your business at the moment?
That's really interesting. And, personally speaking, obviously live sports, or the lack thereof, it leaves a void, I think, in many of our lives. And, you don't realize that until it doesn't exist. But what has been fascinating, and what's interesting about our business and our content and programming strategy, is it's never really been dependent on, live sports to be successful, because, we're really tapping into, evergreen, content and storylines, and just reimagining that for this kind of core and emerging, digital world. So we don't need a LeBron James highlight or a Messi goal to be relevant from a content point of view. We're able to tap into many thousands of athlete-driven narratives, or archival footage from dozens of leagues and rights holders, both traditional and non-traditional sports. Like I said, to reimagine that into programming for this generation. So interestingly enough, we had probably our best week ever last week from a viewership and engagement point of view.
And I'm curious, what kind of stories do you cover at Wave, just to give any sports fans listening an understanding of the kind of thing that you feature on there?
So we have brands and and programming that certainly cover basketball or international football, whether that be amateur or professional. But then we have programming. An example would be our Snap brand and show called No Limits, which is featuring adaptive athletes, or athletes with disabilities who are accomplishing incredible feats, or a brand and a show called The Pump, which was a manifestation of our relationship with World's Strongest Man. And the general premise there was that how can we take decade-old footage from World's Strongest Man competitions and reimagine that into a Snapchat show, or a brand called Gym Heroes, which is all about weightlifting, fitness enthusiasts, or Spirit, which is uncovering stories and narratives in the cheerleading world. And so there's really a wide and kind of vast array of topics and programming, which I think has enabled us to appeal to a lot of different types of people. Like I said, who have different sensibilities and motivations and interests. And in many respects, it's the non-traditional sports or the untold stories about these incredible athletes that outperform some of the traditional programming.
And I've also got to ask, because I understand we've been through the story and what put you on this path, but what was the moment that you realised there was a gap that needed filling in this digital age? Can you remember that moment of inspiration or what put you there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, oftentimes we tend to overcomplicate things
Yeah.
in this industry, and really as an entertainment company, you're ultimately a hospitality based business, and the goal is to serve your fan, your consumer, your customer as best as possible. And I think the best way to do so, or to understand what they need, is sometimes to just stop and listen and look at the world around you and see how people are behaving. I think oftentimes folks try to kind of contrive a worldview that they think is best for them versus just simply seeing how the masses are behaving, and what you can do to be in line with those particular motivations and interests. And so in our case, we saw firsthand this like incredible paradigm shift where many, many, many millions of sports fans were shifting to social, mobile, and digital for their short form video needs. And so it just kind of said to us very, very clearly that if we were going to build a experience for this generation, it would be very much counterintuitive to construct it like it was year 2000 or even 2010, meaning we're not going to go website, we're not going to build our own app, we're not going to program for linear television. We are going to build these digitally native brands squarely for the places where people are. So again, to kind of summarize that, I think we're just simply doing what the consumer has said loud and clear they want, and we're able to recognize that because we stopped and looked at the world around us.
And something else that I think you're doing brilliantly is that cross-generational divide. So I've got to ask, I mean, where do you begin to understand how to connect with, let's say, Gen Z and give them more of what they want? Because that's going to be different to other generations too. But what's the secret behind that?
Yeah, I think that, the credit there goes to, our content and, studio team more than anything. That whether that is a digital producer like James, who runs our Break Ankles Daily brand, or our Snap team, Trevor, Ruben, Xavier, Kevin. Many of our digital and creative producers are a part of our audience demo, meaning they're squarely in that Gen Z and millennial demo, early 20s, kind of ear to the ground, finger on the pulse as to what the consumer wants. So I think in many respects, they're creating programming for themselves and for their peers, and really understanding the tonality and the voice and the formatting that this audience wants is paramount. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I thought, our team is humbly the best in the world at it.
And moving forward, I mean, what's next for Wave? I appreciate there's a lot going on right now, and you probably can't reveal too much. But
Yeah.
Which direction do you see this heading at the moment?
Yeah, so I mentioned at the top that we've really constructed ourselves as more of a holding company, or this sports media group, if you will. And so what that enables us to do is to continue to expand the number of media brands within our umbrella or within our house of brands, and to just continue to go sport by sport or fandom by fandom, and add assets to the stack. And so I think it's safe to say that you'll see us spin up new media brands and properties, perhaps in areas of fandom where we might be a little bit more nascent today. I think it's very much safe to say that you'll see us expand the platforms in which we live on. I had mentioned that today we do quite well across Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and Facebook. We will soon be launching on YouTube, and a handful of other platforms to kind of truly achieve this idea of brand ubiquity and have touch points with the consumer in as many places as possible. And really that all kind of boils down to this, kind of underlying thesis of owning the attention economy within sports and entertainment. By doing so, or by doing so effectively, we believe that, that'll enable kind of new business or revenue lines to manifest over time.
And for any sports fans listening, or indeed any sports teams or brands that want to work with you, what's the best way of finding more information about Wave and finding you online and speaking to a member of your team if they do have any questions?
Yeah, well, folks can reach out to me personally, and happy to to introduce anyone to requisite members on the team. And then as far as our media brands are concerned, you can find Wave across the platforms that I mentioned, but then you can also find our other premium brands, whether that is Break Ankles Daily or Buckets or The Pump or No Limits or Phenoms or Jukes or Haymakers or Dingers, to name a few. Each of these brands, to be clear, has its own unique identity, has its own voice, has its own area of focus, that being a particular sport or fandom. And typically is found today on Instagram, Snap, TikTok, and Facebook.
Excellent. Well, I'll add all those links to the blog post that will accompany this podcast episode, just so people can check you out and find out more information. And let's face it, I think we're all going to be in our homes wanting to find more information on our favourite sports teams and everything. We'll have a little bit of time on our hands. But more than anything, stay safe. Best of luck for the future. And I'd love to get you back on the podcast when things have calmed down a little bit and see how things are progressing. But thanks for coming on today.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
So Wave powers many of the most popular brands at the intersection of sports and entertainment. And like I said at the beginning, all of that takes place on many of those social and digital platforms that Generation Z and Millennials now think of as television. And in just 2 years, Wave has become one of the largest digital publishers in the world, generating over 2.5 billion in video views and 90 million engagements per month. Not to mention the 40 million followers and subscribers, reaching 300 million fans each month too. It just blows my mind. But just like every business and every individual in the world right now, they're also having problems as a result of the coronavirus. But one of the things I love doing on this podcast is not putting a downer on things. We all know what situation everybody's in at the moment. But sharing real stories of how businesses are thinking differently and overcoming those challenges. And that's how I see the future. And if any of you missed it, please check out the recent interview with Daniel Burrus, where he said businesses should not be focusing on success, but being significant to their customers and their new needs. Powerful stuff. So if you do just dip in and out of this podcast, that's one that I recommend you go and listen to. But please let me know your thoughts, your challenges by simply emailing me techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk, where you'll find all the links to the social channels at the bottom too, not to mention over 1,100 other podcast episodes too. Hopefully I will return again tomorrow with another guest, but hey, I'm learning that there's just no guarantees in this crazy world. But rest assured, I will do my best to be here, same time, same place. But more than anything, just a big thank you for listening. Stay safe out there, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.